Hello, friends. We are on location here in Edmonton, and I ran into a local stud here. So I'm from the West Coast. I'll call him local, but I do understand that BC and Alberta don't like when you compare each other. But, I'm from Ontario, so we'll do it anyways. Today's guest is a two-time national champion. He won the Norseca Beach Championships with Christian Redmond. He's represented Canada over 39 times, and he's here at the Canada Cup Youth event coaching with Volleyball BC. Today's guest is Maverick Hatch. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks, Josh. Good to be back in the scene a bit.
How are you enjoying Edmonton so far?
Well, I got here after the monsoon, so no complaints there. It's been nice.
Good. So I guess the first thing, fans of the show will remember the last time Canada hosted an event was in Quebec City, and you and Sam Schachter kind of took the lead as the men's team there and finished a ninth. So can you just talk about your experience there, what's like playing in front of family and friends in the local crowd, and maybe what Ben and Grant or Sarah and Melissa are feeling right now as they go into the final day here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how accurately I can really speak to Ben and Grant and especially Sarah and Mel after everything they've done. Again, it was amazing to see Sarah and Mel win Worlds, so huge props to them. That's amazing for Canada and the sport. And Ben and Grant, they're for sure better than I ever was as a team competing. They're playing really well, and it's nice to see them perform when it matters most in Edmonton. But Quebec, that was a special tournament. I have friends and family. My mom is from Quebec, so that was quite the experience. I mean, Sam and I had to play country quota, qualifier, and then in the main draw, so it was quite a grind, and that was early in our careers together. But anytime you get to compete on home soil, there's something special about that, and it definitely adds a little more energy. At least it did for me in the time. So for the event to be in Edmonton, back after, too long, in my opinion, it's fantastic to see. I mean, it's nice for Canadian teams to get a look. I mean, we had more teams in this main draw than we have, I think, in many of the other tournaments this year. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, for sure. I think, did we get up to 5 on the women's side and 4 on the guys? I'll have to go back and double check, but it felt good to be that competitive and go pretty deep into a 3-star.
Yeah. And so, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, 1-star, whatever it is these days, it's nice to see Canadians, littered throughout the tournament and gives, a flair for everything. You got the McNamara's now. They play a really unique game to them. You got Mel and Sarah, obviously dominant team. Pishke and Sophie, and some of the other younger athletes on the women's side, and then it's good to get them more experience playing meaningful matches, and again at home in front of friends and family. It's special. It's good. There needs to be more of it for sure.
Good. So let's cover your story for any listeners who might not be familiar. You being a West Coast guy, what kind of convinced you to move to Toronto and be part of that kind of first intake of a centralized program? Because I think you, Ben, came, that was one of the first group to really move to Toronto and train full-time, right? Reader was in that. Were you in the first wave of that?
Yeah, Ray Sewell was out there too. Jamie.
Sorry, I forgot the whole women's side. Jamie came out.
Yeah, Jamie was out there.
She came with Elizabeth Cordonier, I think?
Yeah, I don't know if Liz actually ever made it out there. There was a group of us. It was kind of a double-edged sword in the sense where you have to dive full in still, even today. Not much has changed in that regard. If you want to take beach seriously, you still need to be in Ontario majority of the time. You're starting to see senior athletes now train a little more independently down in California, sometimes on the West Coast, and it's nice to see them stretch it out, spread the sport across Canada. But for me, it was an easier change because, like you mentioned, there was Ben and Kame and I. We all got a place together. We were there training full time, and it's always a challenge when you got to step outside your comfort zone, and especially in today's age where there's so much family support at a youth level. It's a big event now. Everyone goes down to the beach, and they got the cooler and the tent, and it's the whole 9 yards. So, taking that dive, I wouldn't trade it for the world. There's so much learning opportunity, not just moving to Toronto and living on my own and managing all aspects of life without much support at all. I mean, other than the support of the people in Toronto that I met, I made lots of good friends, lots of people that supported me, both from a sponsor level and support level, financially. You know, I made good relationships with people, found some sponsors, worked a ton. You know, Beach Blast, George, the Shermers,
Yep.
all big supporters, Katrine, Ivy, and Phoenix, volleyball club. It was massive. It was nothing I would trade for the world, and I strongly suggest athletes make that jump if they're serious about beach. Yeah, now that I'm back on the West Coast, it's, looking back, I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was everything it should have been and more, for sure.
Nice. And let's set the record straight. I think sometimes you get labeled as being, difficult or uncoachable or whatever the methods were, but I always find you to be very genuine. You just speak your mind and you do your thing.
Appreciate that.
One thing I always enjoyed about your playing career is you were one of the first guys to really kind of start a brand. Like, you had a website, you had a blog that you kept up. Like, what made you start that? Because that was at a time where there wasn't a lot of media, so you kind of just did it on your own, right? And they were well written.
Well, thank you. I mean, now that I'm, 32 now, and I was writing blogs online for whoever cared to read them when I was, 21, 22 and older. I actually, when I got rid of the website, I downloaded all the blogs because I want to go back and read them, and I read a few, and I can't believe I was writing and posting some of this stuff. But you're not the first guy to say, like, being so candid online, and you're right. I mean, I don't necessarily shy away from what I feel is my truth anyway, and how I view things, and always open and willing, having a vulnerable conversation, and talking about your opinion, my opinion, and having a conversation about it. Granted, some more intense than others in my playing career. But no, I mean, props to Reader. He kind of led the way before me with a brand and a website, and him being a Comox guy. He and I actually didn't know each other, or I mean, maybe knew of each other, but didn't have a lot of interaction at the time. So he was, definitely led the way and showed me how to do certain things. And I remember sitting down with my web designer at the time, and I pull up Reader's site, and I was like, look at this guy's site, and he's like, we can do something better than this. And Reader was always leading the way, so it was and yeah, props to him. He definitely did it, I think, the best. But he let young guys, he led a good example, so I kind of just took his lead, and you kind of have to have an online presence as a Canadian athlete, in my opinion. Nowadays with social media, it's a whole lot easier. You don't necessarily need a website, but without an online presence, it's that much more difficult to find sponsors. So that's kind of what led the charge for me. And blogging, it's good. I would always write on planes. It's kind of a release for me. Being in Toronto, having people that I was close with and I could have open conversations with, but no family really, where you're comfortable being the most vulnerable and open. So, I mean, I didn't post everything I wrote on planes, but I loved writing on planes on long flights, that 8-hour flight across the Atlantic, and write about tournaments, write about mentality, focus, development, everything. Anything that came out, I would just write. So I enjoy writing. It was fun.
Yeah, that's neat, the way you phrased it about the blog there, where I'm thinking, 2008, 9, 10, 11, when you were doing that, kids today would just use Instagram. I'm not sure the last time they read a blog. I'm not sure the last time I read a blog.
I mean, I don't even know if blogs exist anymore. It's just an Instagram post, and you got a quote or, words of encouragement that you copied from someone else online. I don't know. How does it work these days?
I think, Pedlo probably, I wonder if he would credit you and then credit Reader, and then the cycle goes on.
I don't know if Pedlo's giving me any credit for anything. That guy, he does it well. He does his style. It's, there's some of it that's unique and some of it's not, but it is what it is and it works. So it's good.
Because I don't want to fast forward over your career, but I do want to get to some of the other exciting stuff. So just for our listeners here, you and Christian won the Norseca Beach Championships. Do you remember who was there? I feel like you beat the good Mexico team. I think you beat Ontiveros and Virgin, and there was a good American team. They were like the circuit was good. That was the final tournament of the year, right?
Yeah, it was a good American team. There's Juan and what's his partner's name? Ontiveros.
Yeah, I forget his first name actually.
Yeah,
I should know his name. He's a good player.
Yeah, they're solid. But yeah, we beat them, and that match specifically was hilarious. I'll never forget Christian. He looks at me at one point, and they're serving Christian, and I'm hitting on two, and I'm serving some aces and getting lots of blocks. And I look at Christian, and he just starts laughing, and we're up in the second, or maybe it was a third set. I couldn't remember. I think it was in two. And he looks at me, and he's like, "Wow, you're on fire. Just keep doing what you're doing." I'm like, focus, let's go. Come on. No time for that. And he just starts laughing. I'll never forget that moment. But yeah, it was the American team was Avery Drost, and I forget who he was playing with at the time. But yeah, it was a fun tournament. That was awesome. The special thing about that tournament was that Jamie and Christina also won.
That's right. I remember that now,
and Ben and Kame were there too. They finished third. And so we had 3 Canadian teams on the podium at the end, the third being Jamie and Christina. So that was pretty cool. You know, my not fiance, I think girlfriend at the time, you know, holding the first place trophies together. It was pretty special.
Nice. So you guys won that, suffered a bit of an injury, but then came back, won nationals, won a medal on Orsika with Garrett May, and then you decided to transition into your grown-up job. So why don't you tell us about that? What was it like kind of transferring from an athlete where, I'm glad you came back from injury, so hopefully it felt like you went out on your own terms versus you retired because of injury, and you did play at a high level when you did come back, which was great to see. But when you transitioned, was there any hesitation, or did you miss it, or what could replace that energy that you were putting into your sport?
I mean, at the time I got injured, mentally it was a grind, and it was a grind from 2010 or 11 or whenever we got to Toronto up until that point, and yeah, really think about it, only 4 years, 5 years, and I was already two. Like it was a short time looking back, but felt really long, and it's kind of ready to take a break, and then poof, blew my hip labrum and took some time off, and then ended up working in Toronto for almost 2 years for Greenhouse Juice. Just took a retail job that I didn't like, working in a store with the intention, you know, kind of that athlete mindset, like I'm going to keep getting better and better and better. So took a retail job, and, you know, within 3 months had a manager position in head office, and then, you know, worked through them. I think they moved from a 3,000 square foot processing facility to a 30,000 square foot processing facility, and tons of financial investment from the federal government, and it was a cool process. You know, it was definitely a nice segue into what I'm doing now in Vancouver, which is lumber trading. If any of you are familiar, it's essentially just buying and selling lumber and taking a speculative position in the market, leveraging the futures. And my business is based in Texas, and if I tell people what I do, and like, how the heck did you get into that? And I'm like, a friend of mine worked. They like hiring athletes, and it's competitive, and so it's been a really nice transition. Actually, I really enjoy the pace. For the first time ever, it allows you to have some consistent income. Granted, you know, Sam and I and Christian and I, we were never a consistent main draw team, so you could never rely on that income from volleyball. But it's nice, you know, you get your weekends off and do what you want to do, and if you don't want to go to the gym, you don't go to the gym.
There you go. Well, that brings up a good point. Last week on the show, we had Joel Hannon, who's a student at Ryerson, and he's actually doing his master's on athletes going to the workplace, and are they further ahead, further behind. So with your employer, when you mentioned they like hiring athletes, what are some of those skills that you think are very transferable from you being like a high-level athlete?
Oh, the biggest one by far is just being process-oriented, for sure, without a doubt, especially in a sales role. I know athletes, not all, but a lot, struggle when they're done playing sport. They feel like they might lose their identity and don't quite know what direction they want to go into. But, you know, going back to writing and blogging is what I'd read about on the plane. Not necessarily what I want to do after sport, but how do I apply what I'm learning in sport to real life? And that was always a big thing for me as an athlete. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and the things you learn, not just as a beach volleyball player, but as a Canadian beach volleyball player, and yes, it is a little different nowadays because there is more funding, but we were working in the off season to support our travel and competitions during the season, and you're running your own sponsorships, and you're managing every aspect of logistics when you're competing. At least we were, and I know it's still the same for a lot of athletes nowadays. So like you learn so many skills, and sure, you're not coming away with a paper, diploma, anything like that at the end of the day, but those skills, being process oriented, being driven, self-driven, being confident in what you're doing, but also able to take constructive criticism without getting down on yourself with it, understanding that you're probably still, outside of sport, one of the hardest critics of yourself, as many high performance athletes are. So when someone else gives you that criticism, I find that athletes kind of run with it. And in an office setting, whether it's actually in office or you're working remote, anything like that, the real workplace, those are all skills that people don't have naturally. Not all people, but for sure, those are the skills that I think all athletes can feel comfortable and confident with when they make that transition, knowing that they'll be highly sought after. It's just a matter of being confident in that in the interview process and positioning yourself properly so they can see those skills shine through.
Good. Well said. Thank you. So yeah, transferring back, you moved home. You're married now. Congratulations to you and Jamie.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that helped with the stress of retiring. That you're married to an Olympian, and she probably knows what it's like to transfer from an athlete and retiring and doing that. So you have support in your personal life.
Well, yeah. I mean, I went first there, so it was more so the roles reversed. I was kind of helping her, and yeah. I mean, you should maybe get her on one day. I'm sure
we
she'd
would
to
love
talk
to,
about it.
for sure. And the other thing I was going to mention, being a Vancouver guy, did that help you retire? Because the strength of the community there, where if you really wanted to play, I've heard you guys will just play King of the Beach, like you'll call 3 buddies and you might go down and play just your own King of the Beach, or you might play Cliver, or you'll play Van Open. Like you're not totally detached from the sport, I guess, just because of the community that already exists in BC, right?
Yeah, it was definitely easy. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Probably 2-3 years after being in Toronto, I was ready to go back out west. I remember one time, it was probably a year before we actually moved back out west. Jamie looked at me and I misunderstood what she said, and I thought she said, let's move home. And I was working for Greenhouse, and we had a bunch of things going on. I was like, yep, okay, let's do it.
Done.
No, but definitely having that culture. I mean, going back to the place where I grew up playing on Kitts Beach, and, again, back to the friends and family thing, it definitely makes it a lot easier. Jim Clive runs a great show on Kitts Beach, and yeah, me and a few buddies, we always go down, we all throw $20 in, we play for some money on the line, King of the Beach style. It's fun. It's definitely a good scene. I find the scene in Ontario is definitely bigger. It's more high performance. But the scene in Vancouver, it's tighter from top to bottom, in my opinion. So it definitely made the transition easier, knowing I can still play. I probably play 3-4 tournaments a year now. Probably train 3-4 times a year, but it's fun.
Good. Hopefully in Ontario we can get some promoters involved or some prize money and bring you and Jamie out to Ontario and hopefully play in a tournament so we can see you guys again.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, golf takes up more of my time nowadays,
Nice.
So let me know if there's a good golf tournament out there.
There's a few beach players who've told me that where their theory is the more they play beach, just the worse they get, where it's nice to pick up another sport and at least feel like you're improving or being challenged, right?
Yeah, totally. Golf is a great mental challenge above all else. But yeah, I mean, beach will always be what I want to play. I just think my physicality will let me down in beach before anything else. So,
well, I heard a rumor today that you're going to transfer to a defender and start personally training some blockers in Vancouver. So maybe that'll keep a few years on your career and save some jumps. And
well, I've already started that transition a bit. Playing with Alex Russell, big 10-foot guy, 6'10", sorry. Play a tournament or two with him. It's fun. It's nice to challenge yourself. It's a little easier on the body, not having to run up to the net. Too.
For sure.
Yeah.
These defenders don't know how easy they have it sometimes.
Yeah.
So let's get into what kind of brought us here. So yes, the Edmonton 3-Star is going on, but one cool thing that Volleyball Canada did is we're here for the Canada Cup, which is an under-20 tournament, which actually included about 3 days of training with some national team coaches and staff. I got to present and now there's a 2-day tournament, and I counted today, there's 7 provinces represented. There's 12 women's teams here, 10 men's teams, and we're lucky to have you and a bunch of other coaches here on site. So what kind of got you into coaching right away, and what got you in with Volleyball BC?
Well, as an athlete training full-time, it's easy to coach and make some money, especially in Toronto, because the volleyball scene at a youth level is super competitive. So good coaches are always sought after. Not making an assumption that I'm a good coach, but I would like to think so. So coaching is something I've always done. I think I started coaching in 2008 when I was going to Malaspina, which is now VIU in Nanaimo. And so I've never really stopped coaching. So it's kind of a natural transition. I've always wanted to give back to the youth volleyball community. I initially thought that would be, making the Olympics once or twice, 3 times, who knows, and kind of being that role model as an athlete. And as soon as that path changed, I just naturally fell back into coaching. And so when I got back to Vancouver, started working with Thunder and Doug Reimer out of UBC, coaching Thunder there. Johnny Wiscar and I coached together. Seymour coaches there, Sandy. Lots of good coaches. It's a great club. And more recently, partnered with Christian Redmond and VVL, Vancouver Volleyball League, and Pacific Coast Volleyball Club, which is a new club this past year. And most recently, Jamie, Christian, and I all partnered and took over ownership of BCO in North Vancouver. So that's 10 youth club teams. We're starting a house league out there. We offer beach programming. And, from coaching in Ontario, from getting back to Vancouver with Thunder and VVL and now BCO, the goal is to influence youth development from a high level, where you can have a say in the programming, the technical knowledge and delivery to athletes, all of that. I think that's what excites me the most. And moving a little further past that, working with Team BC and Volleyball BC with this U20 program at the Canada Cup. I think there's a ton of value in this event, and I really enjoy the event. I think it is something that needs to keep growing and empower the provinces to take beach development from here back to the provinces and continue growing it, because right now this 20 under, even 21, 22, 23 athletes that aren't training with the national team are ready to make that leap to Toronto. They age out of programming offered at the provincial sport organization level. And it's important that we don't forget about those athletes, because not everyone is ready to make the jump, whether they're going to university or they want to stay close to home. And it's this type of atmosphere, training followed by competition, lots of provinces, athletes, coaches. That's what Canada needs more if we're going to grow the game. And so I'm super passionate, not just from a youth club level in Toronto or in Vancouver, but also from the PSO level. Having a hand in there in the development of athletes, especially beach. Now that we're back home, so.
Good. And with you have played at such a high level and obviously talked to friends on tour and played in different events, is that the biggest gap you think you'd address first, is what do we do with athletes who are, I guess, over the age of 18 and they cycle out? Or is there something maybe as a whole we could do for youth development? Like what if let's use BCO as an example, you guys are taking over a program. Is there anything you would want to get done in year one that would really set you up for success kind of down the road, that would be like a pillar?
Yeah, well, what we're launching next year, which is the biggest addition or change, whatever you want to call it, is a house league targeted at the grassroots level. When you look at things like Timbits hockey and Basketball Canada and soccer and all this stuff, they target athletes super young. And that's, I think, the only thing I can think of doing that is in London with Cousins and Sean Furnell.
Yeah. They have Timbits. They also have a parent and child tournament, which I think is hilarious.
Awesome.
Where it's funny as the younger parents play with the younger kids. As you get older, well, now the parent is older, right? So it always evens out. Where you might think like, well, it's not really fair that the 30-year-old is playing with their 8-year-old. They're going to beat up on everybody. Where it's kind of like, well, it's still an 8-year-old. And then you think, well, now the 60-year-old's playing with an 18-year-old, so it's not really that much more fair, right? So
That's
it definitely
awesome.
evens out at a certain point, right?
Oh,
I'm sure there's an optimal window for the mom and dad to play with their sons,
Oh,
like
no
they're at a
kidding.
peak, but it's a slippery slope, I think, once you get over a certain amount.
I have not heard of that format before, and I love it. There's so many parents, they don't necessarily have a volleyball background, but their kid gets involved, so they just go full on.
Yeah.
They watch the YouTube videos, and I want to see them on a court, see what they can do. But yeah, no, the house league, that's probably the biggest change, and we don't necessarily want to rock the boat. I mean, BCO is one of the oldest clubs in Canada. They have a long history of success, and like all clubs across Canada, it has their up and down years. So there's 10 teams there. We have great coaches involved. We have phenomenal athletes. And the leadership, they've done a phenomenal job up till now, and they're not just stepping away cold turkey. They're going to stick around and help out. So yeah, the house league, and then kind of status quo. We want to get our feet wet a bit, see what we can do, and then without causing too much of a stir, make sure we make the right decisions, not just rush into what we think without getting a good picture of what the landscape looks like.
Nice. And is there any piece of advice you'd give to a younger athlete who thinks that, someday I want to play for the national team? Is there any advice you'd give to somebody who's not quite there yet? So maybe they're in college, university, or maybe they're a touch younger, that like you're kind of like, oh, if you want to do this, like this is a daily task you need to start doing, or this is something you need to start thinking about?
Good question. Although I would consider myself more passionate about the beach game than indoor, but what, in Canada at least, the indoor will maybe not always provide, but still currently provides more than beach, is a lot more reps and a lot more meaningful competitions. And those two things alone can be transferred to the beach at any moment. So I would say, if you're truly passionate about beach, and for the women anyway, you want to go down in the NCAA or the States and play beach in university, then all the power to you. If that's your goal, look for opportunities to play more beach than indoor. Maybe look for an indoor team that's a little more casual without such high demands that will allow you to train some beach. But me as an indoor coach, I'm of the mindset, if you're going to play indoor, play indoor. Beach is for beach season. They are arguably the same sport, but there's enough differences where they're not necessarily going to complement each other if you're playing it at the same time. So if you commit to indoor, you're committing to your teammates, you're committing to your coach. Just like they expect of themselves and of you, you should expect that of yourselves and of them. Like, you're going to commit to playing indoor, being the best you can. And that team dynamic is huge. I'll be the first to say my partner management on the beach wasn't that great, and I'm a lot more, I would say, open-minded, down to earth about that and how important it is now. But that being said, you learn that in the indoor game. And until there's enough meaningful competition where you can play beach full time and get that, and if you can get that in parts of Canada, all the power to you. But yeah, I mean, take your time, play indoor, and then when you're ready to play beach, whether it's on the West Coast, on the East Coast, down in the States, then yeah, you got to take it upon yourself. You got to get in the gym. You got to make sure you're finding the people to work with that are going to make you better, whether that's training full-time with the national team or training closer to home, because there's more factors than just good coaching that makes you a better athlete. Definitely.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm just looking at the clock. I've taken a bunch of your time, but before you go, I can't let you get out of this one. A lot of our listeners like a good story, and you've played with some great defenders, like you mentioned Redmond and Schachter, but the one I want to hear about, do you have a marquee story? You guys played in the OBA Grand Slam, and you got it to the final, and I think you were technically, like, you were retired or maybe just kind of playing still. And
yeah, that was after my hip injury. Yeah.
I think Mark decided, he wanted to play for his kids, or he was in the beaches, and he decided, like, Marquise to me seems to be like, this is my Marquise story, the king of the secret workout, where we got to the beach and he knows the national team starts at 8. So I believe you guys trained at 7, and I asked him about that, and he goes, I wanted your guys to see that I was here before them. Like, that was the whole point of going at 7, which is that small mental edge of just like, I'm working harder than you.
Well, it was that, and it was probably a bit of he didn't want them to see how he was going to play.
He left that part out.
Yeah. No, and I that was, it's good that you brought that up. Actually, that's something I'll never forget. But it's something he, even in that moment, I learned so much from him, and I wish I would have played with him earlier. But I remember like a ball would come on our court or something, and he saw where it came from and who hit it and whatever, and he'd pick up the ball, and I mean, he was kind of tired in the moment. I mean, we're playing semis and finals and against national team guys, and we're beating them, right? And he picks up the ball and he does this whole act like, where'd this ball come from? Whose ball is this? Just like buying more time. I'm like, this is just, this guy's a veteran, right? Obviously. No, that was awesome. He was so humble on the court and so fun. And I just remember, I mean, live and die by his cut shot, but so many other aspects. I mean, he's still in every right spot. I'm up at the net. I'm trying to do what I can for him. But like, I can't count how many plays he was the guy making it happen. It was unreal.
I just have one more Heath point to talk about where one of our guys approached him after you guys folded them up, and he asked him, like, Mark, like, you dug me a bunch of times. How'd you know that? He's like, well, first of all, I trust Maverick to make his call. And he got you a couple times on a block. And I was like, yeah, I knew you were going to go back to that shot. And I just dug you on this shot, and I knew you weren't going to go back to that. So I just kept progressing with what you were doing, and I basically put you in a box. And I was like, that is the best answer I've ever heard, where he's giving our athlete feedback about, like, how he basically folded him up, but he's still letting him know that he folded him up.
Yeah, that's funny. That's the vintage old school beach athlete, right? Like, I'm going to let you know that I just beat you, but here's the tip.
Do you have any tales from the road you would share, or any hilarious things that happened? Or, like, I'll give you a couple examples. Like, Jake, Gabe, Dallas, and Dallas's partner were in a car, and they got pulled over by a security stop in Brazil. But because they didn't speak English and it was 4 males in a car with the driver, they basically were held up at gunpoint and stuff. And like Dallas thought they were going to get robbed and were going to die. So he's in tears. And like,
I heard that. So Binstock and I have a similar story. We rented a car from Puerto Vallarta and drove to Manzanillo for 2 separate Norsicas. And everyone else flew and we drove. And the roads are super sketchy. The size of the potholes are like the size of the car. You're driving down into the pothole and back out the other side. And anyways, we get to Manzanillo. We play the tournament on the way back. We got to return the car to Puerto Vallarta and then fly home. And we pull up to this military checkpoint, and I have the camera out, obviously. I was like, oh, this is cool, and kind of sketchy. So I'm taking some photos, and Josh's like, put the camera away. I'm like, nah, man, it's fine. So they stop us. There's 2 old men there with guns, all dressed in the military uniform and stuff. And then basically kids, like 4 or 5 kids, maybe 6 feet tall, guns the size of them, and none of them speak English. And I guess, by the end of it, we knew they just wanted to search our vehicle, and us 2 white guys driving in Mexico on this back road, super sketchy.
Yeah.
And then delete the pictures on the camera. But like, they tell us to get out of the car, we get out of the car, and the kids don't speak a lick of English, so they don't know what's going on. As soon as Josh cracks his door open, the kid just clenches his gun quick, and I just remember Josh being like, dude, are we gonna be okay? I'm like, just relax. It's fine. Meanwhile, I'm like, oh my God, are we going to be okay? Like, it was sketchy. And then, anyways, we were fine. We drove back home, but that was a pretty cool story. There's lots. I mean, I can't even remember half of them. I remember we traveled down to Brazil, Sam and I, into Brasilia. And I don't know what happened, but I booked my flight an entire day earlier than him. So I landed in Brasilia, and I messaged Sam. I was like, hey, where you at? He's like, I'm at the airport. Like, okay, great. You just got in? He's like, no, I'm waiting for my flight. And it's an overnight flight, so to crash a night in Brasilia, it's like our 2nd or 3rd tournament, I forget, maybe 2nd year on tour, I don't remember. And so I'm in the airport on my computer trying to book a hotel room and book the sketchiest hotel room. I have no idea. I just get into the hotel, close the door, lock it. I think I had like some bars or something. I drank some protein powder for dinner, just slept, wake up, left. Met Sam at the airport the next day, like, young guy on world tour. What else? There's for sure stories. I mean, I remember nights of playing credit card roulette for the bill. You like English guys out, and maybe a couple Poles and some Americans, and like 10 or 11 of us around the table, and sure enough, all the credit cards in the hat. And I forget who lost that one. That was a big bill, like $1,000. I mean, I lost my fair share too, but it kind of evens out over time.
See, this is the stuff of being a professional athlete that we don't get to hear about as, civilians, that you guys are just living the life and these checkpoints and credit card roulette, that it's not all glamour and just siding out on center court. There's a dark side to being a professional athlete, I guess.
There was one cool, and granted, I haven't reached out to them in a while, but I know I could tomorrow, and they'd welcome me like family still. But Sam and I played a tournament in Oldham, Switzerland. And the way they do tournaments in Switzerland is awesome. It's one court, it's 8 teams per gender. The stands are right there, circular grandstands. And every match is played on that court, and it's right in the city center everywhere they go. Beautiful locations, and they do it up great. It's awesome venue. So Sam and I played a couple tournaments in Switzerland, and when we were playing Oldham, at the end we either finished second or we won. I forget. We made the final anyway, and after the game, this older lady comes down and she looks at me and in her Swiss accent, like, "Oh, your name is Maverick." Yeah. But she looks at me and she says, "Our son is named Maverick." I said, "No way." She said, "Yeah, the government won't let us name him Maverick because it's not a real recognized name in Swiss." I said, "Oh, that's crazy." So then the next day, before we took off, she brought him down, and Johnny, the husband, and Maverick, and Janine, Maverick's sister, they all came down and met us, and we hung out a bit. And then the next year I went back to Oldham, and they were there, and we played in Stad a couple years, and they drove up and saw us in Stad. I mean, still to this day, when I take a flight and I travel, they gave me this little wooden cross. It has a love on it or something like that, and I put it in my bag, and it's just something I've always kept from that. But definitely a cool experience, and like I said, I feel like I could message them tomorrow and go hang out.
Wow, very cool.
It was quite cool, the people you meet on World Tour.
Nice. Well, I think that's lots. Thank you for taking the time to come on the show. I know you're busy. You got athlete meetings. You got a big day. We got playoffs tomorrow. So
yeah, no, it's going to be good. And props to you. Good job with the podcast and everything you're doing. And it's nice to see you here at the U20 running the show. Like I was telling you earlier tonight at dinner, definitely stepped up the game this year compared to last year. And I look forward to seeing what this tournament can be. I think it's important for everyone, and look forward to you being a part of it, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks to you for being a part of it as well. I think the athletes are getting a lot out of it, and now we can hopefully step up the coach development part of it too and just keep this thing going. But it's been a good year, and look forward to doing this again. So, yeah, thanks again. We'll sign off there.
Right on.
Sweet. Thanks, buddy.
You bet.
Thanks again to Maverick Hatch for taking time out of his busy schedule during the Canada Cup to shoot a bonus episode for us. We can't wait to have you back on the show when Dallas can join us. We have lots more bonus content coming from Edmonton, so please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and stay tuned every Friday for new episodes. If this is your first time listening to Passin Dimes, feel free to check out previous episodes, like the Estonian pair of Mart Tisar and Kusti Novak, who was our first non-Canadian guest. If you're joining us from the West Coast, make sure to check out the Seymour and Jody Z episode, or just check out our archive section for over 20 episodes. Thanks, and stay excellent.